Good afternoon, everybody. It's 12 noon on a Thursday afternoon, and this is the time that we get together to talk at Voices, Radio Zindagi's Voices, a show where we talk about topics pertinent to us as American Indians and also Americans as a greater community. You're live on 92.3 FM HD2, and we are Facebook streaming live on the Radio Zindagi handle Radio Zindagi. So please go there and watch us and listen to us here. And if you have any comments, questions you want to quip into this conversation, please feel welcome to write to us on the Facebook live feed. We're going to talk today about Facebook, the very platform we're communicating to you on. Almost 2 billion people around the world use this product, owned by Meta. Formerly, it was called Facebook. And this includes WhatsApp, Instagram, every day. And for many of its users, this almost 1 trillion valuation company is the internet. It's their primary platform for communication and information, and millions of us depend on its product one way or the other. But this company and other big tech companies in the Valley have been mired by a lot of legal lawsuits, a lot of irregularities in the way they work. There have been paper leaks, there have been whistleblower testimonies, and the recent limits on facial recognitions. Are these tactics all diversionary? In August, FTC filed an amended complaint against Facebook in the agency's federal antitrust case. This complaint alleges that after repeated failed attempts to develop innovative mobile features for its network, Facebook instead resorted to an illegal buy or bury scheme to maintain its dominance. It unlawfully acquired innovative competitors with popular mobile features, and then it buried these companies. It moated its monopoly, it lured app developers to the platform, surveilled them for signs of success, and then buried them when they became competitive threats. Lacking serious competition, Facebook has been able to hone a surveillance-based advertising model and impose ever-increasing burdens on its users. This is supposed to be an open space for third-party software developers, but they have reversed course and required developers to agree to conditions that prevent successful apps from emerging as competitive threats to Facebook. It is doing bait and switch on its competition. It is telling people what to do, it's ruling lives. And we're here today talking about Facebook and a specific VIP program where it allows some people to talk whatever the hell they want to talk. It's called X-Check or Cross-Check. And some people, it enforces its rules on. And many of these people who are the VIPs of Facebook abuse the privilege, and they post materials which is harassing and incite violence. And this would typically have led to sanctions. So we're here today talking about all of this with this very esteemed panel comprising of VINITA GUPTA, who's a writer and a journalist, and she's a retired CEO entrepreneur. VINITA is the first American woman of Indian origin to take her company public in the US, and she knows this entire ecosystem inside out. We also have David BONNACORSI, who is a former Fremont Council member and a civil attorney, and we will talk the legalities with him. And we have ASHISH MANTRI, who's also a Silicon Valley technologist. So with this esteemed panel, let's talk about Facebook. How dangerous is Facebook? Let's start with VINITA.
From me as a technologist and empathizer of entrepreneurs, I have a lot of respect and empathy for Mark Zuckerberg, his team, and for Facebook. And I think they have taken something from nothing, introduced a new kind of platform. They have enabled a lot of little businesses to flourish and generate revenues. So they have done a lot of good things, but they have also gone without checks and balances. And that is the subject that we all want to talk about, and we are talking about, and needs to be addressed.
Ashish, what do you feel?
So honestly, I don't think Facebook is completely to be blamed. The only issue I see with Facebook is that it's a monopoly. They don't have any competition. Google was there in the space, and we had some other players in the past, but right now it's only Facebook. And that is the only problem I see in today's time. They are very powerful, but Facebook by themselves is not powerful. We as users are making it powerful, right? Just imagine a scenario, 3 billion users, active users in the world. If we just had a hello world on our page and maybe a rose picture and do nothing, Facebook would be dead, right? It's the data we provide and the data we share and the comments we look for, the likes we look for, and the time we spend on Facebook. So Facebook is essentially just a platform. We can't completely blame Facebook for all that is happening, but there is some things that Facebook is responsible for is regulating their platform. And that's the reason why I'm on this call. I really want to talk about that. So I'm going to, give back my time, Meera, when we reach that subject. Okay?
Absolutely, Ashish. Thank you for that.
I'm following
David.
the rules, unlike the last time.
Yeah, absolutely. David, what do you feel about Facebook? As not only as a user, but also as an attorney.
Well, let me talk about it as a non-attorney first and user. I put more blame on Facebook, and it was confirmed in my view by the testimony of Ms. Haugen, the whistleblower. It's not a question of our actions in free will choosing the content that we have. We are all victims of an algorithm model where the ad revenues are generated by likes and clicks. And so that what it does is it tends to polarize and tends to skew. And so it drifts us into content over which we no longer have control. And I think the great film Social Dilemma highlighted that as well. As an attorney, we'll get into the regulation issue. Ironically, there's two things. One is Section 230, which immunizes Facebook from liability because it's not deemed to be a publisher. The publisher of the content is one that could be held liable, but Facebook as the host is not. We can talk about that. But from a First Amendment point of view, ironically, we got to be more careful when we deal with governmental regulation as opposed to private regulation. When Facebook regulates or Twitter self-regulates, there's no First Amendment protection for its customer base. But once the government gets involved, then we have constitutional issues. So it's a real balancing act.
Perfect. Well said. However, there are problems that there have been paper leaks and whistleblower testimonies, which are pretty damning for Facebook. For example, Facebook knowing that its product Instagram could be dangerous to the mental health of teenagers, yet trying to introduce the same product for tweens, preteens, right? And there insider documents saying that, yes, we understand that it could be dangerous for them, but it's an untapped market, big and untapped market. This is how they look at it. Then there was erroneous and false content about COVID-19 and its cure that was allowed to be circulated all over Facebook and Instagram and through WhatsApp as well, without any regulation. Then, of course, how can we ignore the political extremism that led to Jan 6 events? They allowed all these polarized parties, they allowed misinformation, they allowed these groups to be formed for the longest time, staying on in the corners of letting them thrive with their imaginations. But it's their own leaked documents which tell us that they knew what was going to happen. There is another aspect of this leaked document, which is pertaining to India, where they realized and they have documented that interreligious conflict of India was happening on Facebook, and their own researchers found that hate speech spiked 300% amid bloody riots, and that Indian users held the company responsible for failing to prevent or police it. But Facebook has traced some of the stream of hate to influential entities tied with India's ruling government and hasn't taken action about, and they've all said that it's due to political sensitivities. Now, this is all in internal leaked documents of Facebook, and their reason that they give here is that hate speech against Muslims is rising worldwide. What do we do with this? Literally. So they literally let it happen. How do you take all of these internal documentations and the leaks? How do you justify Facebook's strategy, Vinita?
I think first we have to put it in a framework of what is going on. Some of the harm that is being done by Facebook, such as either ethnic riots or January 6th insurrection, these have to be kept under control. And they haven't done a good enough job. That's the best way to put it. However, according to what I heard carefully, what Ms. Hogan had to say was that they had ethics and what is it called, civic integrity group that she worked for, and that group could control some of the bad impact during 2020 elections. So they know how to control certain things, so they could expand that to the other things. But according to her testimony, they basically dismantled the group and distributed, or whatever. Facebook has a retort to that, but they dismantled that group. So these things are very difficult problems to solve, and that is not up to Facebook to solve these problems, but these problems could be solved together by figuring out which is the harmful way of impacting our demographic, which should not be touched by harm, like our children, and be able to still provide the value of being the social media platform of vibrancy. And so there is a balance there, and it needs to be addressed.
David, what do you think about that?
I thought she made an excellent point, citing to Ms. Hogan's testimony, that internally, Facebook does have the ability to regulate, and did so during the 2020 elections, but significantly, and this is implied in what Ms. Gupta was saying, that after the election day, but between that day and January 6th, they receded. They let the controls go. And so all of this insurrection activity that would have been regulated and, of course, stalled prior to November 3rd were allowed to fester. We just need to develop at a regulatory level. There's a great concept of reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. So if you have a parade, or you have a protest rather, a city or a governing agency can deny a permit if you wanted to have it at 3 a.m, because it would be a disturbance. It would be after curfew, whatever it might be. So there are controls at the governmental level. And some of those, I think that Ms. Hagen had the greatest insight, and I'm not a technologist, but she says, rather than controlling content, you can control algorithms. And that may be the best way to have a regulatory agency control algorithms so that they do not incentivize this type of polarization, this skewing. So not individual content, but the algorithms that promote it, so that people would have to take more active roles in trying to find it and may never find it. So that would be something to explore.
So coming to the technology aspects of it, and I will dig in a little deeper into the algorithm aspect, as you guys have said. They changed their algorithm in 2018, and it was designed to improve their platform. So, and because they were having declining user engagement on the platform, and Mr. Zuckerberg declared that his aim was to strengthen the bonds between the users and improve their well-being by fostering interaction between their friends and family. So the documents that have been leaked show that the staffers warn that the change is having an opposite effect, is making Facebook and those who used it angrier. And Mr. Zuckerberg apparently resisted some fixes proposed by the team, and these documents show that he was worried that they will lead people to interact with Facebook less. So there is this goodness that Facebook says that it promotes, and then there is the way they skew their algorithms to be actually providing harmful content to the same users. And their algorithm did nothing to prevent the Jan 6 rise. The algorithm did nothing to prevent hatred being the platform being used for hate and violence. We all know Nancy Pelosi's video, we all know what happened with that. They refused to take it down. Now, when things like this, they have the technology to trace where it started. They have the technology to trace who started it, yet they do nothing about it. How do you even justify Facebook then? And this question's for you, Vinita, and then I'll go to Ashish with this because we're talking algorithms now.
Okay, so when I think about all these issues and the divide being created in the country, and part of it is attributable to social media and companies like Facebook, but there is a greater, I mean, Facebook just happens to figure out that negative content creates more engagement. And they may not have even figured it out. I don't know. It may be their algorithms figured out that that creates more engagement and promoted that. But the main media knowingly also does the same thing in my way of thinking. They take every headline news is a negative news these days. And that is very concerning because that's what is creating the divide in the country or enhancing the divide. No particular organization or industry can be blamed for that, but that is what is happening. So I see the problem, but I don't think that Facebook is knowingly doing any major conversion towards that. However, they have not addressed the problem. They did one good thing was they did research over that. But bad thing they did was they did not let the results of their research be made public. And maybe David needs to say, I would like to hear from David whether it is that would be considered as material information under SEC to say that they did not disclose material information, which was the results the results of how harmful Facebook can be for certain segments or for certain discussions. So I will leave it at that, but these are the kind of questions that we all should be asking at this point, and the regulators should get involved.
Absolutely. Ashish, you want to take a stab at this?
So,
because it's algorithms.
Yes, so I agree with Vinita. And, it's not just Facebook. There are multiple players. Matter of fact, Facebook is just a small piece. I mean, I know we are not supposed to, or we are not here to discuss Fox News, but Fox News has regulations, FCC, SEC, all that good stuff. Yet they only care about the 40, 20 million viewers they get every time during, prime time. So they only care about that. The kind of news they spread, fake or not. The problem here is we are trying to regulate, in a way we are trying to regulate the internet, and that is not possible. Facebook is just the means to, share data. And I said this earlier in the opening, Facebook essentially is a platform. The content is user generated, user shared. Facebook rarely generates their own data. Unless it's ad revenue, somebody's paid to create an ad, things like that. Otherwise, it is user responsibility. I just feel, I look at WhatsApp in India, there's so much crap that's going viral all the time. People just share without, being responsible, without verifying the actual content, right? And same goes with Facebook. I mean, there was a time when Facebook was a social network where people would post their family pictures and food and restaurants and places they visited. That's hardly the case, rarely the case actually, right? So I still feel Facebook is responsible because they are not regulating the content. But again, the content is not Facebook generated. We need to keep that in mind, and users have to get more responsible. And that's a tough one. Meera, it's not easy.
So Ashish, to your point and to Vinita's point, of course, all the content on Facebook and other big tech companies as well is user generated. We're talking UGC, right? And when it's user-generated content, the argument that Facebook always has is, oh, we're trying to regulate as much as possible. We're able to regulate sliver. Our algorithm does the rest. Now, coming back to the algorithm, but the algorithm also plays games, right? It puts into prominence some content and it doesn't put into prominence the other content, right? So if you go ahead and you sponsor a post, you're prominent, just like on Google paid search, right? Whether or not you are irrelevant or you're valid or the news is fake or not fake has nothing to do with the fact that more users get to see that news just because you paid for it. And it's the same with the algorithm here. How do we justify that? How do we as a society justify paying to get relevance in search engines, paying to get relevance on these platforms, and then becoming credible authorities of information which might be false and which might be hateful or might incite hate? So algorithms are, I mean, I completely agree with you. Facebook's got nothing to do with the content, that it drives the user's drive on its platform. It is just a platform for content aggregation. However, it does have algorithms that put into prominence some of the content if it's paid for, some of the content if it goes viral, and their algorithms are responsible for a lot of mistrust and hate in this country and around the world. So how do you justify those algorithms, Ashish?
So Mira, maybe I'm a little biased because I'm a technology guy. So, I'm a little biased, and also I have some Facebook stock. So anyways,
You're disqualified.
I'm not going to say anything against Facebook.
You should have made me sign a disclaimer on, things like that before. So, okay, jokes apart, see, things like these have been happening forever. 50 years, we have TV, television, advertisers would actually, there is a study, they do surveys, and advertisement on TV in California is going to be different than the same ad in a conservative state, right? We'll have a liberal ad, we'll see all colors of people, all genders of people. If it's a conservative red state, it's going to be white old man, usually, right? Sorry, David, I didn't. Okay, I'm just kidding.
That's fine.
So basically, this has been happening for a long time. We are used to it. It's just that it's been unidirectional. With Facebook, it's much easier because there's a larger penetration, right? An advertisement is maybe state or country specific on TV. With Facebook, I can create an advertise and post it in all of India if I would choose to, right? That is where the problem is. And we cannot really regulate all these things. I don't have an answer for you. I'm being very honest with you. It's beyond me. Sorry.
So basically what you're saying is, if you have money, you can literally be the most honest person as far as these online portals are concerned. You can advertise yourself to be the most credible person, as long as you can spend money advertising dollars with them. VINITA, what do you think about that?
I think we have to keep in mind that there is a freedom in capitalism that we should have, and we do have, to make it vibrant and functional. And part of that is being able to do things more, make your dollars go longer ways. And by targeted advertisement, like the TVs have started doing, and also the platforms, internet platforms do it far more efficiently. This has become a possibility that you get more bang for your bucks. And that was when I was running my company. Marketing was a very esoteric activity where you put in the money and you didn't know what you got out of it. And now you can measure it. Now you know what you got out of it. So it is a good thing. It is a tool that has been created because of internet, because of targeted marketing. It needs to be just, I always keep saying, when we find problems, it's not to just abandon the platform and start thinking about how much money they are making, but think about the users. What are the users getting? Yes, some users, there is a lot of discord and hateful content and all that is happening, but there is a lot of goodness that comes out of technology. And like Ashish, I'm a great believer that technology on the whole serves us far better than anything else. In fact, it keeps the economic engine of this country going. So I am for protecting it, but not without antitrust, not making them become monopolistic in behavior, and certain type of checks and balances within the law and with the good intent and with cooperation of private and public sector with trust. This is the way to solve the problem generically.
Thank you, Vinita, for that answer. That was the most succinct answer from both you and Ashish. Dave, will the strengthening of antitrust laws help us regulate the internet?
I think so. I wanted to first, before I answer that, I wanted to answer Ms. Gupta's question to me. Yes, I do think SEC has a role as part of the regulatory framework.
Yep.
And in fact, Ms. Haugen, after she testified before the congressional committees, turned over her papers and documents to SEC. So I'm sure there's an open investigation on what they did and failed to do on Instagram and disclosing to stockholders. So yes, we have to strengthen antitrust laws, but I think as we talked about offline before, it may not. I mean, what the antitrust was last used to break up AT&T into baby bells years ago, and so you had all these little phone stations. But right now, it's like dividing up one large liquor store into 4 liquor stores. All you've done is replicate the problem into different platforms and haven't really addressed the negative content. I think we need to look at different analogies. I certainly believe in capitalism. I do believe in the free markets, but I would analogize Facebook more to cigarettes and alcohol. And we went through 3 years or 14 years actually of prohibition, where we actually banned alcohol. It was a stupid idea because we couldn't enforce it. But once we reintroduced the ability to sell alcohol, you have to have an ABC license. It's a huge regulatory arena there. Cigarettes you can't advertise cigarettes on TV. You can't, and you don't show actors smoking anymore if it's verboten. So I think we have to look at the harms that are caused by Facebook and not just simply say it's up to the users and Zuckerberg's goodwill, but we really do have to look at an aggressive regulatory structure to try to rein in Facebook so that it doesn't polarize our society. There's a common good element here that when you have insurrectionists finding each other in these private chat groups, that's as bad as selling drugs, in my view. It is as illegal drugs. They become like little pushers in the marketplace on Facebook. And I think we have to reset our view of what we should and can do to prevent these harms to society.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, David, for that answer. Now, coming back to, because you mentioned alcohol and you mentioned advertising, did you know that Facebook lied to advertisers around their reach? That got advertisers to spend more money on Facebook than they would have otherwise done. And with these advertising frauds, which they decided not to tell the investors, they were sued by advertisers for allegedly inflating key metrics around how many users actually see the ads that companies pay for. And people who are in the know, and of course, documents that were leaked out actually tell us that because of a lot of these ads, because of the way this was done, there was an increase in teen suicide rates. And there's a relationship that Facebook themselves drew between their product and that increase. So there is a big question out there with a lot of lawmakers and senators right now, is that, number one, should we create a federal agency to overlook social media platforms like FDA? And secondly, should we hold Zuckerberg and other Facebook, or Meta as they're called now, executives criminally liable for not only securities fraud, but for advertising fraud and insider trading? And David, this question's for you first, and then we'll go around the room.
Well, I believe that they are already subject potentially to insider trading. There's nothing about insider trading that exempts Facebook. I do think that committing fraud is something that the advertisers can sue and have sued for. But those are, again, at the margins. I do think that creating an agency or creating some sort of omnibus regulatory framework rather than individual pieces, we need to have that larger discussion so that we don't squelch Facebook. We allow for its growth. We allow for new content, but at the same time, really have a strategic way of eliminating harm. And you mentioned Meta a couple of times. One of the things that is harmful to society is the very use of the internet. When you and I have a cup of coffee together, we can see each other's reactions. We tend to modulate how we're going to say things. When we become anonymous or can be anonymous on the internet, we can go to greater extremes and act in socially inappropriate ways because there are none of the social cues. That has to be addressed in some manner, you know, and so just the use of the Facebook itself, use of social media itself is a great harm.
Thanks, David, for that. That was really insightful. Vinita, what do you think about this? My first question being, should there be an agency like the FDA to overlook social media platforms? And number two is, will the change of leadership at Facebook help any of this?
Europe has already created an agency called GDPR, General Data Protection Regulatory Agency. And I think there is definitely, in my mind, there should be some sort of a body created, because to embed this important issue in one of the existing agencies of the government may not serve us well. More importantly, even, is that these people should be equipped with the data scientists like Ms. Hogan, so that they understand the problem more fully. And just like financial industry is regulated by people who are experts in finance, they could work in the financial industry. Now, some of them have chosen to work for the government, and they can police the financial companies, regulate them in a proper way. Similarly, we need a body within the government to do that, like GDPR. And I'm sure people, the listeners know that GDPR recently fined Google 50 million euros because they were not disclosing properly. It was a subtle issue. They were not properly disclosing to the users what will be done with the data that they are collecting. Is it going to be used to enhance their experience, or is it to increase their advertisements? So those kind of things should be more transparent. So we need to figure out what are the problems we are going to solve with that agency and do it better. The second part is the leadership at Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg. We all revere personalities like him in Silicon Valley and in the US in general. And we think he has done a tremendous job on that. So I would say that company is done very well. He has done very well with the company. And the answer to these questions, like in an investment banker, when the company is not doing well, an investment banker or a venture capitalist, venture capitalist doesn't go and change the head first. They try to resolve, because there is more to be accomplished by having a continuity, especially a young person like Mark Zuckerberg, who's only 37 years old. I think he has, if he has a capacity to listen, I think we all will be served better.
That is the moot here, right? Capacity to listen, right? Ashish, you were just joking offline about the Facebook stock being down 0.5% because of us right now, and stop blaming the show for it. But we must tell our listeners that we're live on 92.3.
It's happening. Change is coming, Meera. Change is coming.
We're live on 92.3 FM FM HD2 on Radio Zindagi, and we are live also on the Facebook Live handle of Radio Zindagi, which is Radio Zindagi. Now, having said that, Ashish, do you think anything gives for Mark? Let's hear it.
So before we go there, I'm going to just, I agree with Meera. Sorry, with Vinita. Sorry, Vinita. I agree with
You don't
Vinita.
agree with me?
Right? I agree with Meera and I agree with David. I agree with everybody. So Vinita has valid points, and she mentioned about, governments taking active steps here. But again, and I'm repeating myself here, it's the internet. And the internet cannot be regulated. That's the problem. Even if a single country takes necessary steps, there are countries where there is no Facebook today. One reason or the other, be it China or a country in the Middle East, right? They have different reasons why they don't have Facebook. It doesn't mean they are doing better than the other countries which have Facebook. So anyways, long story short, basically we need an international body who is going to oversee social networks, so that, we have similar rules across the board. Because it's very easy in today's world to create pages, to create fake news, sitting in a different country and just spreading it in the country you intend to cause harm to. That's the problem here. So just the US of A creating or regulating Facebook is not going to really resolve or solve the problem we have. It has to be on a global scale, correct? I think I'm going around in circles. Okay.
No, not. You're absolutely right. It has to be on a global scale. And this, what you're suggesting here on our show, is the fact that there cannot be just one body in one country.
Right.
It has to be a global body. The
Right.
problem with global bodies is, of course, every jurisdiction has its own local laws. For example, we have a very important right to speech, our First Amendment. And other countries do not have the right to speech. They do not have any right
Right. So I'm interrupting you here, Meera. I'm sorry, but here's the thing. Look at climate change, right? There are countries who are together, right? If we want to do it, it's possible, right? Climate change is a global issue, correct? Internet, unregulated, social networks, unregulated, is a global issue today. So I think we need to work on a global scale here. Just fixing issues for a country is not going to solve the problem.
So,
it is no different than climate change.
I completely get your point. Ashish, you are equating Facebook or social media regulation to climate change. However, let's just look at it in terms of the First Amendment cult that we have here in the United States. We cannot pass laws that require social media companies to remove X or Y, whereas UK and EU are already passing these laws. That means break them up, as we say, cancel them, break them up, would be illegal for us here, whereas in other countries it'll be perfectly fine. As per our constitution, we really can do it. Now the problem over here is, if you take an analogy, just like David mentioned earlier, the tobacco industry, what happened? Were we able to regulate? Were we able to just stop advertising something, or just stop talking about something? Will it make the problem go away? It's just like cars can kill. If you're speeding, doesn't mean we'll ban cars. How do we fix it so that kids don't drink and drive? Right? So that getting that analogy back here, David, what do you think? Do you think that breaking up Facebook is the right response, or regulating it in terms of free speech? How are we skirting these legal issues here?
Yeah, as I believe I said earlier, I don't know if breaking up Facebook, although that, smashing it may psychologically appease certain politicians on the left and right, that they're showing the constituents that they're doing something, but I don't think it deals with the root causes. And all you're doing is replicating the problem, not eliminating it, because it's really scalable. If you have a small Facebook, it could just grow and become as large as the former Facebook. So I don't think that's the way to go. And I do think that you raise a good point about the First Amendment. I've been probably the most pro-regulatory of the panel here. although Vanita mentioned the European model as an agency, which I think is a start. But we also have to worry about free speech in another context. We don't want to empower our government to be able to control content with forced messages and government propaganda. That's what's happening in China. That's what's happening, I think, to some extent in India with Modi, that there's certain things that they're putting pressure on Facebook to take down because it's dissent. It doesn't go with the narrative of the ruling elite. And Facebook, to its discredit, is putting profits over information. So it bends there. We got in this country does not empower our government to do the same thing. So I want to be very much of a libertarian in that respect. And Ashish's point of analogizing it to climate control or climate change, those are governmental agencies that can enter into treaties, and then whatever the jurisdictions are, they bind themselves to a common set of principles legally through a treaty. We can't have a treaty with Facebook. Facebook is not a sovereign nation. So unless there's some way that we can uniformly through treaties have control over Facebook, that's a missing part of the equation that I don't understand how we would do it, because again, local jurisdictions may want to retain local control about how they deal with this issue. China's not going to give up its power to be able to regulate Facebook and eliminate dissent. So I don't know how a global agency would work. So I think rather than creating something that we can't accomplish, I would rather start here and maybe base it on the European model, but take the care of the problems here in the United States for my country, for our country first.
So,
David, well, but there's another aspect to this, and I might want to point out here for Ashish's point. And Ashish, I'll let you make your point right after I've spoken. But basically, what you said about jurisdiction and treaties, laws are different. For example, in the United States, you can take a picture of anybody, tag him or not tag him, put it out on the internet, and that's completely legal. But if you do the same in a Middle Eastern country, you can literally go to jail for 10 years. And be fined $100,000 because you are not allowed. You just can't take anybody's picture and put it on the internet as per local laws. You just can't, without the person's knowledge, you can't take anybody's private life and put that out on the internet that this person was doing this here. They're regulated in that way. Whereas over here, you can literally talk anything about anybody and put it out on the internet, and there is absolutely no law regulating that. So all these things really matter when it comes to regulating social media platforms. But the main point here is we need legislative relief here. We're talking legislative relief because things have gone wrong over the last few years. But before I ask my next question, I want Ashish to make his point.
So David, when I say globally, or we need to have a body which is governing social media or social networks globally, what I mean is social networks have to meet a certain criteria. Only then they are allowed to do business in that country. It has to be a uniform, universal criteria. Just like climate change, when there is a climate change summit, countries are expected to meet a certain criteria. Similarly, if you want to do business in my country, you have to behave. And I think that has to be done globally. That can be achieved globally. And right now we are we are too young here. And I think right now, if we set the right plan, it's going to help us 20 years from today. Facebook is just 17 years old. It's not too old. We can actually have a governing body at a global scale, just so that, 30 years from now, just like climate change, right? We are not thinking about today. We are thinking about 2040 or 2050.
So Ashish, to your point, you're saying that it's perfectly fine for countries to really determine what will work for them as a country in terms of social media platforms, which would mean that where we're going to go by the Constitution and allow everything and anybody, anything, except, of course, we need to take care of safety and privacy. Any other country in the world, literally, the government can say, you can do anything that you want here as long as you pay us money, Mr. Zuckerberg. We'll give you a free pass, but you can't disable us, because we can do whatever the hell we want to do because we're in government. And the moment you cross the line, we're going to throw you out. And this is exactly what happened in India with all the death threats against Facebook and Twitter employees when they actually they actually disabled the account of one government official in India. I think it was the Minister of Broadcasting, because he said something very hateful and harmful. And Twitter had to Twitter had to face a lot of issues in that country. They were almost asked to leave. The Indians started their own tweeting platform called GU. Now, having said that, you know, how do we leave it to countries to regulate? This is giving too much power to non-democratic countries or autocratic countries to really it could really undermine the safety and privacy of people. But what I feel is there are three kinds of relief that people are asking for in terms of social media platforms. They're asking for safety on these platforms. They're asking to address privacy, and they're asking, we need to address competition. How can a big company gobble small companies down and refuse their existence, or harm their existence by their monopolistic behavior like Facebook and Google do? So these are three aspects that I want to talk about. So if Facebook were to disappear tomorrow, what would happen? Would there be 100 companies filling the void and doing all the horrible things that Facebook is doing? Or do we have a framework in place that would dissuade people from doing the same? And this question goes first to you, Vinita.
So you said safety, I missed the second one, and third was competition.
The second one was safety, the second was privacy, and third is competition.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think safety, when equated to harm, is the most important one and most solvable one, in my opinion. It requires a lot of different constituents in a country to come together to solve the safety problem, but it's a solvable problem. Privacy is more of a disclosure problem, because once we make it easy for users to select what they want to do, then how private they want to keep their information, or they want what not to be done with their information, while remembering that we are getting free service from Facebook and other social media platforms for that. So I think privacy, as much as everybody makes a big deal out of it, in my mind, that is not a big deal. Competition is a complex problem which has existed in the Valley ever since I have seen it, because that is how, that is part of the strategy of companies, how to not let competition come up. And certainly antitrust doesn't say that nobody should try to do that. They just want some restraint on crushing competition, especially when a company has become monopolistic or has gained market power. And competition is a very, sorry, I lost my chain of thought. So I would end at that competition is a tough thing. Companies gobble other companies. And at the time when technology evolves, it is hard to identify whether the company they are acquiring is going to flourish and become, from its nascent stage, to billions of dollars of company or not, or their product would generate billions of dollars of revenues or not. So these things are hard for the regulators, the Federal Trade Commission, to figure out what laws to apply to them at the time, because all mergers and acquisitions have to be approved by them. So these are my rough thoughts on the things. I would give safety the most importance, and privacy the least out of the three.
Perfect. Ashish, you know that Facebook had data which their employees have leaked now, which leads us to believe that there were countries in the Middle East where Facebook was being used for human trafficking, and Facebook did nothing about it. So of course, safety is a big issue here, but privacy is another issue. What do you think about privacy on Facebook, especially the privacy that we've seen go away with the Cambridge Analytica scandal? where FTC fined Facebook 5 billion, which really it's nothing for Mark Zuckerberg. But yeah, even after that, I don't think things have improved. They still practice surveillance marketing, or it's called surveillance capitalism. And there's a thought process out there which says that surveillance capitalism is as morally flawed as child labor is. They're actually equating the two. Ashish.
So honestly, Meera, in very simple terms, what is security? Security is locking the door at night, right? And privacy is drawing the curtains when you change your clothes, right? It's as simple as that. So essentially, it comes down to users setting their settings for security and privacy. Options are available in Facebook. If you choose not to set the right options for your security and privacy, data is going to be shared. It's as simple as that. And it's just not Facebook, it's been happening all the time on Google, on internet search engines, through email. That's how internet works. And I know I'm repeating myself, but somewhere, we are talking about regulating the internet. It's just not possible. These companies come in business because they want to make money, right? Facebook started as a very simple platform. They were a social network. It's a very simple page. It's just, I think it's PHP with MySQL in the backend. There is a whole bunch of JavaScript there. It's not rocket science. I don't even take Facebook as a technology company, never ever. They don't even have a serious software or hardware product. You can very well live without Facebook. I have friends who've never been on Facebook, never been on WhatsApp, never been on Instagram. They are leading a full life. So Facebook is not essential. And if Facebook goes away, I don't think. The problem here is we are so used to it because in today's, I'm not answering your question, but I have so many thoughts going on right now. Today's generation is very self-centered. I'll be very honest with you. We want the likes. Okay, we want the likes, we want the comments, we want to be popular. Instead of being self-centered, we need to be, we need to censor our thoughts, self-censored, CNSORED, right? We are being too self-centered. I'm guilty. I post pictures of my vacation, my restaurant, because not only do I want to share it with my friends and family, I also want to see the likes, right? My hobby is to take pictures. So I want my best picture to be loved the most.
Absolutely. Ashish,
I
completely get your point of view, but I need to quickly ask David a 1 minute question, and then I have to wrap up the show because we're nearing showtime. David, Section 230, do you think changing Section 230 and putting liability on the platforms for the content that they show, would that help?
I believe it will, but when I hear Facebook having ads where they say that it needs to be reformed, but they don't tell me how, I get a little bit worried that if Facebook's behind reforming 230, maybe I'm not for it anymore. So we have to define terms. I don't think that there should be strict liability for everything that Facebook has. You can't go to the opposite end of the spectrum because it may be unmanageable. But there should be some, what we call in the law, scienter requirement, some knowledge, some standards of care that should be applied to Facebook, that if they've been put on notice and they don't do anything, then maybe there's liability, but not just strict liability that somebody manages to play the system and get some content that's false. I don't think Facebook should be penalized for that. So it's a very fine-tuned issue. I wanted briefly to say privacy, or privacy, as they say in American English, is really an issue only between us and the government. And unless we have laws that extend regulation to private corporations to protect our privacy, that we need to build that regulatory framework. And briefly, I know it's only a minute, but I do not want to depend upon users to make their own privacy settings. Ashish is very sophisticated in engineering, software engineer likely. We're dealing with kids that are preteens. We're dealing with the elderly. We're dealing with a whole population. And we don't say a 14-year-old should be able to go into a bar and they should regulate how many drinks they should have. We need to have a much broader concept of who the audience is, different cultures, different lack of education. no critical skills training. We just can't leave it up to the users. That's my biggest takeaway. We do need to balance and have the locus of control outside a 37-year-old Harvard dropout who had trouble dating women.
Well, David, that's the end of our show. We are talking about Facebook here today, and I hope you all enjoyed the show. Vinita, Ashish, and David, thank you for being here with us. Well, listeners and viewers, the debate about Facebook is way too dichotomous. And one group says that Facebook is effectively evil. The other group say it's really not a big deal. Technology supports it. Technology is a way to go, but it leaves a huge space in the middle for people who treat Facebook the same way we think that any other addiction should be treated. So it's entirely up to us which way we go here. However, we brought up several very important factors that Facebook needs to look at, and we hope this works for Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg in the future. But you know what they say about privacy and security and safety, it begins at home. That's all from us today at Voices. We'll see you next week, 92.3 FM HD on Radio Zindagi. Take care and goodbye for now.
Bye, guys.
Good night.